guys, it's Mr. Walker here, and welcome to another math lesson with Mr. Walker. So I was asked to step in and do a math lesson with you guys today, and at first I thought it was because, well, I'm in such great shape, and this lesson is about shapes, so why not ask the pro, right? But evidently that's not the reason, and that's not even what our goal is. We are going to be working with shapes today, but with a different type of shape. And what our goal is for today is to recognize that equal parts of an identical rectangle can have different shapes. Okay, and that might sound a little confusing to start, but basically we're going to see that we can split some shapes, specifically a rectangle, into different equal parts and in different ways, but still, even though the shapes that we split it into are different, they're still going to be identical and at least equal. So we'll jump into that. We'll get more into that in just a second, but before we go that far, let's take a look at some of the things that we're going to need today. So there are a few things you're going to need, and some of this stuff you might have at home, some of it you might not, and that's totally okay. I'm going to give you guys some options for some different ways you can, different things that you can use to complete this, and obviously all of this I'll be kind of doing here and walking you through on the screen. So if you don't have it, you can just kind of follow along and play along with me. But some of the things you'll need is a Geo Board, okay? So this is a picture of a Geo Board. If you're not sure what it is, if you have one of these, great. If not, I'm going to show you a way that you can get to like a digital or a virtual Geo Board, so you can build this kind of online. So you will need a Geo Board if you have one in 4 rubber bands. If not, like I said, you can get to the one online and use it there. If you have some construction paper, that would be awesome as well. 2 construction paper squares would be great in 2 different colors. And also if you have 2 construction paper rectangles in 2 different colors, that would be great as well. So we're going to use squares and rectangles today, and shaded half circle. And I have an actual template that should be available either in the module or maybe for download in the video description. So if you have that as well, that's great. If not, we're going to be drawing all of these things as well. You'll be able to see them up here, so you can kind of just follow along with me or make them yourself as we go along. Okay, so I'll give you a second if you want to pause and grab those things, and then you can come back and we'll start shaping up. Alright guys, I got 2 squares here, a black square, a purple square. So I have 2 squares, so let's look at the black one on the left first. If I wanted to divide this whole square in half, right? I wanted to divide it into halves, into 2 halves. How would I do that? What would that look like? Take a second, think about that. And if you have a square that you can try this with at home, go ahead and try it out. You can either cut it or draw a line. How would I get that guy in half? Awesome. All right, so let me show you my Mad Ninja skills here. And if I came across this square, yeah, right, and I cut it in half. I could cut it in half this way. I could also go like vertically as well. But if I go horizontally here, I will cut it in half and have 2 equal parts, right? That means that's what half is. I have 2 equal parts, okay? So that's that with that square. What about this purple square over here? Can I cut it in a different way? We already talked about being able to go horizontally or vertically. Is there another way I could cut this square to make 2 equal halves? Alright, well, for those of you that weren't sure, let me show you this with my Mad Ninja skills. So what do you think? Is this square, is it split into halves? What do you guys think? Yeah, it totally is, right? And we know that because if the pieces are the same size. If I were to take this piece here, let me just kind of rotate it a little bit, and lay it on top of that other piece, it's going to cover it up exactly, right? So they're the same size, they're the same size of shape, they're the same size triangle. So it's possible to not only cut them horizontally through the middle or vertically through the middle, but we can also cut it in like a diagonal across and still split the shape into 2 equal halves. Pretty cool, right? All right, let's do this. We're going to switch over now to the Geo Board, okay? So if you don't have a Geo Board, let me go here. There is a site, apps.mathlearningcenter.org/Geo Board, okay? And you're going to find a Geo Board. This is what a Geo Board looks like again. So if you have one of these at home with the rubber bands, the really dangerous things that'll help you shoot your eye out, you can definitely use one of those if you have one. If not, hop over to that website and you can build one digitally. That's where I'm going to go now, so let's go do this. Alright guys, so here's the virtual Geo Board. I will say when I went to this the first time, I had to refresh this page to get these rubber bands to show up at the bottom. So if they don't show up for you the first time, try refreshing it and see if it kicks in, okay? So the first thing we want to try to do is we're going to use 1 rubber band to create the biggest square that we possibly can on this Geo Board, okay? And if you're not sure what I mean, let me show you what I mean. I'm going to bring this rubber band up here. So it's hooked onto these 2 hooks right now. and I'm going to drag this out, okay? And I'm going to grab this band here and kind of pull it around there. So right now I have a rectangle, so I'm going to actually stretch this guy up and this guy up here, this guy up here. There might have been an easier way to do that, but that's the way I put it right there. So I made the biggest square that I possibly could by going around these outside pegs, okay? So if you guys haven't done this yet, go ahead and try it out. If you have a Geo board at home or if you're on this website, make a Geo board, try it out, make the biggest square you possibly can, and then we'll come back and we're going to do some other work with this. Alright, the next thing I want you guys to try to do is see how many ways that you can show two halves on this board. Now, with the examples we just looked at a second ago, I could take another rubber band here and kind of like string it across, right? And show, let's see, one half there. And I'm going to take another color here, do this orange, string it across, and show another half up here. So I have a half up here in orange and a half down here in yellow. So that's another way, or one way that we could show two halves, okay? So I gave you one. I want you guys to see if you can come up with as many more as you can come up with. How else can we split this square here to show two halves? Go ahead and play around with that for a second, and then we'll come back and we'll discuss all the ways we found. Alright, as we said before too, we could also find halves by going like vertically. Alright, so I'm going to pull this guy here and kind of separate this way. Actually, I think I'm going to try to take this, I'm going to take that yellow band off for a second. I'm going to take this orange one off too. If you just click on the band color, by the way, and then click that little trash can, it'll take that one off. Okay, so I still have my white one going around the outside here. And if I put these two red ones up here, stretch them out, I can show splitting the square the opposite direction. Okay, so now I have it vertically split in half that way. Alright, let's get rid of these guys. And again, we could do like we just kind of saw a minute ago. And if I take this purple one here and I could split it diagonally, into two triangles that are the same size, right? Easy enough. And that's pretty much the main ways that we could split this triangle, right? And I could obviously also do it, have the triangles go the other way as well. So I could split from this diagonal to that diagonal. Okay, so I can go this way, or I can go across the other way. Kind of like the same thing we could do going across the middle, right? I can go vertically or I can go horizontally. So, cool. We've split this square into halves. Easy enough, right? Let's now see if we could split this square, this Geo board square, into fourths. See if you can find at least two ways that we could split this into fourths, okay? I'll give you a hint and say there's probably I'd say maybe 4 ways that we could split it, but see if you could find at least 2. So give this a try, split it into fourths, and then we'll come back and we'll share what we found. Alright guys, here's one way I split it into fourths, okay? I have 1, 2, 3, 4 squares, right? So there's fourths. That's one way you could do it. Another way we could do it is to make these lines go vertically, right? Go vertically here. Uh-oh, running into trouble. Here we go. Let's try this again. There we go. Okay, fourths, 1, 2, 3, 4. All right. Here's another cool, tricky way that you could do it is, let's see, bring this guy up here, down here. Look at that. I can make squares out of my square. Alright, let me get some of these guys out of the way. Grab another color here. Oh man, look at this. I am blowing some minds right now, right? I'm telling you, this is cool stuff. So I am splitting my square into fourths by splitting my big giant square into 4 smaller squares, right? It's kind of like Power Rangers or Voltron or something like that. We're splitting one big robot into smaller tiny robots. I don't know if you've either seen any of those shows, but anyway. So I split my one big square into 4 smaller squares. So I'm able to split it that way, right? Okay, I'm going to give you guys a hint. There's one more way we could do this using triangles. If you didn't figure out that way yet, take a second, think if you could use triangles to split this square into fourths. Okay, I'll give you a second to think about it, and then we'll come back and share it. Alright, For those of you that didn't figure it out or you're still struggling with it, here's what I'm talking about here. If I make one triangle, right, one triangle right here on the bottom, I can make 3 more smaller triangles along the outside. Okay, so check this out. There's 2. Here's our thirds. And here is our fourths. 1, 2, 3, 4. 4 triangles. I have split my square into fourths using triangles. Pretty cool, right? So there's a lot of different ways that we can divide up this square to make halves, to make fourths, to make different shapes. Even though every time, even though we're making different shapes, every time the shapes, they're equivalent, right? They're making fourths or they're making halves. They're all the same size. I'm not just willy-nilly cutting this square into different random shapes. I'm making shapes that are all equivalent and showing a fraction of that original square, right? Pretty cool. All right, we're going to take a break from the Geo board for a second and come back here because I want to show you one last kind of thing. Well, maybe a couple last things, but another cool way that, you know, we're splitting the shape, this square, into all of these different shapes, like rectangles and triangles and different things like that. But how can we be sure that they're actually like the same size? Like if I split my triangle or if I split my square in halves using a triangle, or if I split my square in halves using a rectangle, how do I know that that's like half, that it's actually half and not like more or less or something like that? So let's take a look at what that means and see if we can illustrate that they're actually showing a half even if they're 2 different shapes. Alright, so if I take my Mad Ninja skills out again and I cut these 2 squares into halves, and I'll do one as halves diagonally as in a triangle. Perfect. And I'll do my other one horizontally, like 2 rectangles. Awesome, perfect. So now I have these squares. They were cut, I cut them into halves, right? But on one side I have it halves as triangles, the other side I have it halves as rectangles. How do I know that these halves are actually half of this square, right? If I take this triangle and try to line it up over this square or over this rectangle, I can't show that it's the same amount, right? Like it doesn't line up. It's no good there. So what do you guys think? How could we actually demonstrate that one is the same size as the other, that they're both showing half? Well, here's one way I can kind of do that. I could take one of my triangles and I could cut it up into smaller triangles to see if I can actually make a rectangle out of it, right? Crazy, right? Sound kind of crazy? Well, just stick with me for a second. So I'm going to take this triangle and I'm going to cut it into 3 small triangles. Ready? Here we go. And I fibbed, I'm sorry. I'm actually going to cut it into 4 smaller triangles. All right. Now I can take these triangles and I'm going to rearrange them a bit to see if I can make a rectangle out of them that would match the rectangle I have there. So let's see, one here, put one guy here, and one guy, I gotta turn him around a little bit and fit him in here. And goodness gracious, would you look at that? What have we here? Is your mind just blown right now, right? We have made a triangle into a rectangle to demonstrate that half of a square in a triangle and half of a square in a rectangle, it's the same thing, right? They are equivalent. Mind blown. Crazy stuff, right? It's pretty cool though, because we can show these relationships among these shapes, among equivalent shapes that we can make. From one original shape, we can make equivalent other shapes, and they're still representing the same things. Pretty cool the way that works out. All right, so I would encourage you guys, if you haven't done this already, I know you were kind of following along with me, of course, but if at home, if you do have that paper, try it out for yourself. Take your paper, make 2 squares of the same size, like we started with, okay? 2 squares of the same size, cut one of them diagonally to make triangles, and cut the other one either horizontally or vertically, it doesn't matter. And then out of your triangular half, make 4 smaller triangles. Okay, cut it into 4 smaller triangles. Again, I'll kind of line it up here so you can see what we did. Okay, so there was 1, 2, 3, and 4, right? So you can kind of see if you wanted to fold it, you could fold this half over this half. You can fold this part over here and this part over here, and then cut it out that way. So you could cut it into those triangles and then rearrange those triangles to make a rectangle. Pretty cool stuff that this all kind of works out and fits that way, right? All right, awesome. Thanks for hanging with me for that. So let's try one more thing. Let's have a little bit more fun real quick. So I have my 2 squares again. I know you're probably getting sick of seeing these squares, but we're going to do one more thing with them. So we're going to use halves of these squares to make some new shapes, right? To make some new shapes. And I want you guys to think about it for a second and think about how many different polygons can you make out of these rectangular halves that we have here? How many different polygons can we make? And feel free, if you want to think about like cutting them into other shapes and things like that, go for it. But how many polygons can you make out of these? Let me just get you started with one example. Like if I were to take these 2 guys and kind of stick them together this way, I can make one long rectangle. And even if I wanted to add these other ones in, right? I know it's going to kind of go off the screen a little bit, obviously, but I can make like one super gigantic, humongous rectangle, right? So I could do it that way. You could arrange things by kind of moving them this way, and I can make like an L kind of shaped thing, right? Going this way. So take a second, play around with those, see what else you could do. Like I said, even if you wanted to cut one of the rectangles in half, you could do that and make some really funky looking shapes, like whatever you guys are feeling up for today. Use your imagination and have some fun building, okay? So just take a second, rearrange those polygons. Rearrange, I should say, those rectangles or those squares to make some different polygons. See what you can come up with, and then we'll share what we found. All right. So in all the rearranging that you did and all the moving around of these squares and of these rectangles, did the amount of paper, I should say, the amount of the shape, did it change at all? Did it ever change? Did we ever get more or less of it? No, even though we moved the halves around to make new polygons, to make different shapes, they were still the same size. They were still representing those 2 squares and those halves. It never really changed, even though we're rearranging it in different ways. And even when I cut this one in half and I got these other squares here, it still didn't change the amount that we had. We were just able to cut it and to rearrange it in some different ways, okay? So that's kind of the point that we're trying to make here today, is that we can take shapes and make other shapes from them, and as long as we're making it in equivalent cuts, if we're making them into equivalent pieces, we're not going to lose anything, right? We can always rearrange and do different things like that, and we shouldn't lose what we started with, okay? So hopefully this is all making sense. Hopefully you guys had some fun with shapes, but if you didn't do this today, if you didn't follow along with me, I encourage you to go back and do that. Cut out your shapes, move things around, play around with this, see what we're doing here. Cut those triangles, try to make your triangle into a rectangle, do all those fun things. It's really it's more fun if you get your hands dirty and play around with it, make stuff on the virtual Geo Board or on your real Geo Board if you have one. Do that stuff. It's more fun than just watching me play with shapes up here. So hopefully this makes sense. As always, reach out if you have any questions. You can reach out to me, to your teacher, learning guide, anything like that, but advocate for yourself if you have questions. And I thank you guys for watching, and we'll talk to you soon.